It's time for our Trimet General Manager Report starring Neil McFarlane, good old Uncle Neil. I'm going to be going back east tomorrow, and I'm finding I'm having less and less time available to dive into this material. So this could be the last actual examination I get to do of a Trimet board meeting for quite a while. And as time has gone on, I found that I'm losing more time to other things, and I guess that was inevitable. I wouldn't forever be able to continue spending all day watching and listening to Trimet, although I will say I've enjoyed every minute of it. But life is starting to come in on me here, and things are happening which are going to divert my attention from this material. Anyway, we're going to listen to Neil's last general manager report, and let me say about Neil, I've been spending, ever since he was appointed general manager, I've been watching this man from the very first day. And I will have to admit that I find him very likable. Okay, I really don't hate Neil at all. I think that Neil is a good man doing bad things, but I don't think that Neil enjoys it. I think if you've really watched him over these last years, he's not having any fun destroying me or his other union employees. I don't think he's enjoying that at all. I think he's actually hating it underneath that shell of his. And when I ran into him in the airport, and one of the most interesting meetings I've ever had in my life was running into him in the airport. I was walking into the restroom, and he was walking out. And right where the big round door is for those restrooms, we ran into each other right as he exited, and right as it was very bizarre, to say the least. And he dead stopped just like I did. He knew who I was immediately. And needless to say, I knew who he was. And it was a very interesting encounter, actually. And I guess that was the only time it was only a 5-minute conversation, but it was somewhat profound in the sense that, I got a little sense of the man. And here's a man that, if there's any one person in Portland who's responsible for the rail, it's Neil McFarlane. Here's the guy that really is responsible for building the rail system in Trimet in Portland. He's directly responsible for, I think, just about all of it. I mean, he was in charge of capital projects when they put in the Blue Line, for crying out loud. And here's a man that could have retired and been somewhat of a hero to transit people. I mean, forget about the bus versus rail argument for a minute. We'll assume that the rail building has actually been beneficial to the region. We won't get into the argument of yes, it was or wasn't. But the fact that it was built is directly linked to Neil McFarlane's managing of these rail projects, because that's what he was doing. He was head of capital projects for years, and he's an engineer by trade. And he went and took this position of general manager, his crowning career achievement. You know how careerists think. They want to keep moving up. That's the careerist mindset. You want to be bigger, you want to be better, you want more money, this whole American career idea. And so he took this job, knowing full well he was going to be talking shit about his union employees. And I don't even think that was this was all planned. This was all part of the Fred Hansen regime, believe it or not. I remember hearing a year or two before Neil took over from Fred that the idea was to get the Green Line up, to get the West up, and then come after the Union. They didn't want any distractions while those two things were happening on Fred's management. And if you look at the way things came down, it turned out to be true, because as soon as Fred was gone, after a few months, Neil came forward with his anti-union shtick. And it's pretty much ruined his credibility forever with his employees. And I'm not sure if he realizes that his Neil McFarlane, the man, will be known as a union buster versus being the man who created the Trimet rail. He could have been the big hero of the rail. Instead, he's kind of the GOAT general manager who decided he was going to take on his union employees. And I feel bad for the man, because I don't think he's like that. And when I saw him at that airport and I had that little chat, I told him right there, I said, you could have been a hero if you just stayed at Capital Projects, but you chose take this job, knowing full well that you're going to be attacking your union employees. And I know that's part of their thinking, why they deserve more money, because they're working under so-called stressful situations. But that was all understood when they took the job. This is not like something that happened to him. It was all understood. I mean, he doesn't deserve any more money. None of them do. They deserve a pay cut. The most atrocious thing about his attack on his union employees is that while he's decreasing my standard of living, he's increasing his own. I mean, that's the part which I can't stomach, is while they're trying to destroy us, they want to get richer. Now, if they actually gave back something, oh, well, we have to cut our union benefits, well, we should cut something too. I'm not talking about their 9-to-5 Blue Cross. You know, they live in a different environment than the union employees do. They work 9 to 5 in climate control offices. They don't work all hours of the day and night outside, exposed to all kinds of pathogens constantly. You know, they say, well, we already lost our health benefits. It doesn't equate. It's not equal. You know, the health benefits they have are perfect for them. We need the better benefits because of the nature of our work. But they are saying that we need more money while they're destroying it. That's the part about all of this management stuff that just really irks me, is how they are enriching themselves at the same time they're destroying their union employees. And I don't think Neil was ever comfortable with it. I don't think he likes it. But there he is today, still doing it. And it'll be interesting to see how Neil goes, how he actually leaves Trimet, what that will be like. I remember when Fred left, they had this whole big, all these people talking about how wonderful he was and all of that. It's all on video. It's all in my archives. Fred was great. He was a great thinker and all that. Turns out Fred was a finagler. He finagled himself millions in salary, giant-sized pensions, and he took his stick to Australia. And that worked for a little while. But finally, they didn't want Fred had to leave Australia. He's back in Portland, I understand. He's probably flying under the radar somewhere around here. But that ended for him. You know, Fred's shtick finally ended. I mean, Fred was a con man, basically. He was like that movie. What was that? The movie that I have playing. It's Bart Simpson's episode on the monorail. Fred was like that salesman in that episode where he comes in with a stick and he's giving this great presentation about the. And that's what Fred really was. He was a con man. So Neil takes over from the con man. Now he finds himself, and I think it's undeserving. I think that Neil, the man, is probably a pretty decent guy from what I've seen of him. And it's just a shame that he's decided to become the executive that destroyed his union personnel and destroyed his union personnel's morale. They have a long way to go there to rebuild their trust with their union people. It's sad the way that they've treated not me anymore, but I know what it was. I was there when they were clamping down on me. I mean, there was this whole movement to clamp down on people like me who were independent and free thinking, and we're not going to have that. Either you do what we tell you or you're out. And, you know, some people can handle that and other people can't. Anyway, let's watch Neil's presentation to the board.
So, Mr. Board President,
yes.
Continue on. Thank you, Shelley. And again, we are into welding and concrete placement, which is the last stage of that overall construction effort. So we're really pleased to be at that point, and we should finish this up by Friday night. I would also just note that there's a great deal of work going on really on that construction front that has been difficult as well, and so very long hours on that side of the house as well to try to really minimize the duration of this overall shutdown. And candidly, it is something we're going to need to get better at because we do have an aging infrastructure, as we've talked before, and there are places where we will need to do some regular work. And sometimes we can limit that to a weekend in a very shorter period, and that's going to be our focus, of course.
You know, if you recall, a year or two back, the union made some press release and some noise about the lack of maintenance on the MAX line. And ODOT, you know, a government agency, came in and said, no, everything's just fine at Trimet. Everything is hunky-dory. And here we are a year or two later, and everything the union said comes to pass. There's been a lot of deferred maintenance, and here he is admitting there's been a lot of deferred maintenance. The question, of course, is why has this been allowed to occur? Well, really, the easiest answer is because they're too busy expanding their system to be taking care of what they already have. That's not brain surgery to figure that out, but that's what's been happening here.
But there will be some broader areas. The last thing I would just note is that once we're done with this, we have learned a lot about civil infrastructure and construction. This will be a much more resilient and better constructed section of track work. And candidly, probably wouldn't surprise you to note that our biggest challenge related to maintaining a really solid track structure is water. Now, you might not think about that this time of year, but the rest of the year it becomes pretty obvious that that is really one of the bigger challenges in our climate. And so, and indeed, that was one of the challenges that caused more rapid deterioration in this particular area. I would just note on ridership, well, we certainly will expect the August numbers to reflect this week's activity. I would say that the July numbers we saw were very encouraging overall. Weekday bus ridership was up about 8.6%, weekly overall about 7.7%, and actually peak ridership overall was up on the bus system about 10.3%. So we're seeing very healthy response. Again, I think to a large extent to the service increases and improvements that you approved and we put in place in March. I would note West was essentially flat, or excuse me, Max was essentially flat in terms of ridership, and West had seen some increase, though not quite the double-digit increases we've seen up to now. So nice, healthy 5% growth on West from July to July.
He's talking about the 10% increase in ridership during commute hours, the prime time ridership. Bus ridership, I think, was up 2% overall. I mean, Trimet always has this way of finding ways to make it look better than it actually is. Okay, prime time ridership is up 10%. Well, those of us that have been watching Trimet activity know that this is where they're headed. They pretty much dismantled all of the suburban service that wasn't prime time, and they're concentrating on commute hour service. And the bus service has always been the backbone of Trimet, no matter how much they've tried to push the rail. It's actually the bus service that carries most of the riders. And Max is still flat, and it shouldn't be any surprise. I mean, Max has been very unreliable this last year, and there's nothing worse than being stuck in a stuck train. It's worse than being stuck in a stuck bus, because in a stuck bus, you can get out, but not in a train. And then you add to that this crazy Gestapo-like fare shit they got going on, which I don't understand who thought of that, but it's the most abusive thing I've seen. I mean, they just hold up the whole train while the police go through and check everybody. You think at the very least they would allow the trains to move so they're not making everybody late, but they don't. They hold up everything here. I mean, this police state idea that the police can just hold up your life whenever they want to, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the way it is. The police can just interrupt your life whenever they want, and it's tough. And the way that Trimet has allowed that to happen on their system has definitely not helped their ridership.
But speaking of service, this is also a very big month for our transportation division related to improving service upcoming. You might recall that we're investing a great deal of money, over $3 million per year, to add more service to our frequent service lines so that our frequent...
Let's say a word about that, too. I mean, all of the services that were cut in 2011, 2012 are I'm not sure if they're fully restored or not. I know that the service is nowhere near was with the so-called Great Recession, which really never really occurred. We've examined the figures, and although Trimet likes to roll out that excuse constantly, it didn't happen. If you look at the statistics, and we have them posted, you'll see that the Great Recession didn't actually hit them that hard when it comes to their revenues. It went down slightly, but not enough to justify all the cuts. And they're bringing that service back now. And Opal made a very clear, convincing argument back in 2012 that the service cuts were not needed. And they turned out to be correct, and there's been no media coverage about it. They've been ignored just like me. They called this 2 years ago that the service cuts that were made then were not necessary. I think it was all part of a strategy to retool the bus service to supplement the rail service more and to be able to attack the union. They needed to manufacture a crisis. This is not unheard of. Government officials do this all the time. You see this with the city of Portland with their road fee now, their road tax they want to impose. Well, if you don't give us this road fee, the roads will fall apart. They're manufacturing a phony crisis, and that's what Trimet did in 2012 when it cut service to the bone.
Service and all of our MAX lines will have the 15-minute service increment into the evening. The 12 frequent service lines with improved evening service are the 6, the 8, the 9, the 12, the 14, the 15, the 33, the 54 and 56 combination, the 57, and the 75. So these are truly regional and system-wide improvements that I think we're very happy to see. I would also note that line 4 and 72, two existing frequent service lines, were already at 15-minute service as a minimum, and generally well above that because of the heavy demand on those lines. The Max Green line will also have 15-minute service or better service, matching the service levels on our blue, red, and yellow lines. So that will also be an improvement. Southeast Portland and Clackamas County will see. And then we'll also be adding a number of buses to relieve overcrowding and to improve schedule reliability, and that will occur on these lines, actually 12 different lines, the 4, the 8, the 9, the 10, the 15, the 20, the 33, the 44, the 76, the 85, the 94, and the 99. All of that new service starts on Sunday, August 31st. So we're really looking forward to the improved service and the better system operation overall with the service. I would note that this has been a huge challenge for Shelley and her team, particularly related to training. We've had to really up the intake of new employees into our operator training program and really, frankly, increase the size of that pipeline pretty dramatically in order to be able to staff up for this level of service improvement. So again, my thanks to Shelley and her team for all of that.
Well, if they hadn't made the environment so miserable for so many old-timers like myself, they would have more people available with experience for this. But lots of people, such as myself and lots of others, got out of there because it was not a pleasant environment to work in anymore. And so now they have all these new people who don't know where they're going, very inexperienced. And when you have inexperienced people behind the wheel, you're going to get very inconsistent, unreliable service. And unfortunately, that's what we've been hearing on the scanner anyway. All kinds of, they don't know where they're going, they're lost, they miss stops, they miss people, there's lots of problems. And all of these new people, which have no bus driving experience coming in, it's going to take a while for them to figure out what the hell they need to do. That's not an easy job. It's the most misunderstood job in American culture. It's a very difficult job. It's difficult on all kinds of levels. Nobody understands it. It gets a bad rap, and it's just a shame because if they treated people as professionals, if they brought them in as professionals, if they brought them in as full-timers, gave them a big stake right off the bat, they'd have a more reliable system, but they don't do that. They set up their bus driver program as kind of a disrespectful. You have to go part-time at low wage, bad seniority, and then you got to go through all the seniority. The way, it's hard to explain, but it's set up to discourage good people from being transit operators. It's just not productive to finding good people, and they're lucky when they get good ones.
Any questions on that?
Very quickly. And those of you who know me may find this kind of funny. Do the hotels and visitors associations have a link?
There goes Esmond again, another off the wall to the hotels and motels. I mean, what the heck, man? Those are the people that do ride this. They have all the propaganda. You read any tourist magazine about Portland, and they'll tell you how great transit is, okay? Forget about Trimet, the tourist magazines. He should be worried about the citizens, not about the hotels.
to Trimet, so if they come in here for a week, they can buy like I say, a weekly pass, or make it easy for them to do it online.
Well, we work
So
really.
if I'm sitting in New Jersey and I want to come into Portland, want to get around downtown, can I do that sitting ashore?
So I think generally the answer is yes, but I would tell you that it is hotel dependent in terms of the level of services that they offer their customer. I think the highest level is at the Doubletree in the Lloyd district, where they, last time I was checking, they were actually selling passes and fares and that sort of thing. And at the front desk, they actually have transit tracker information for the customers about when the trains come and all that. So we work really closely with hotels and with Travel Portland. But again, some focus on that business and want to be really responsive to transit customers. Others it's less important to the business model. So there is some variation in that.
Okay, thank you.
I'd also just remind you that we have a convention pass program that is run for us by Travel Portland as well. So if you're coming to town for a convention center convention, you'll be offered free ridership, if you will, during that period of time to move from, for example, a hotel downtown to the convention center. So we also offer that service.
Great, thank you.
And Director Desmond, you asked, I think, at the last meeting, timeline associated with Title VI analysis that might be required or would be required as a result of the FTA and follow up on the opal complaint. So let me step back on that one a little bit and step through sort of where we've been and some of the choices that we have associated with where we're going on this. You might remember mid-July FTA.
I consider the whole opal fiasco one of the bigger disgraces of the Trimet organization, the way they held the opal 3-hour transfer up because they filed that Title VI complaint. And I guess what the board finally gave to opal was the student fare decrease, which is something significant. I'll admit that was a good thing. And but really, the whole opal, the way they handle opal, the way they drag them out, it's just disgraceful. It was just disgraceful.
Issued a decision on the opal complaint, and again, remember that they alleged a Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 violation because of the lack of a Title VI proper analysis associated with the transfer change that was put into place some time ago related to 2-hour transfers and the printed tickets that was associated with that. And you also recall that FTA dismissed that complaint really on 2 grounds. One is that the opal complaint wasn't timely, but the other was that the state of FTA regulation at the time didn't require that transfer analysis. But they were very clear, FTA was very clear that moving forward under their new guidelines that has since been issued, that a Title VI analysis would be required for any change in transfer time or fare media.
Translation is that Trimet couldn't get away with doing it again, okay? They got away with it on a technicality. In theory, Opal's claim was correct because they changed their transfer policy without doing an equity analysis, but FTA rules didn't say they couldn't do that at the time. So, okay, you can get away with it, but they couldn't get away with that now. Basically, Opal's claim was correct by today's standard, but a technicality got them out of it. Just bullshit, government covering for each other.
So that's the background to that. And so sort of jumping forward, what does that mean now in terms of the consideration of the ordinance that you have tabled? You might also recall that the FTA offered, indeed, I would say encouraged a great deal of collaboration between Trimet and FTA staff related to the future Title VI analysis. And so FTA.
See how awful the sound quality is on this? It's just awful. You can barely make out what he's saying.
About this timeline, and one of the key issues is it has to do with the data that we have in hand available to answer the question transfer times, and is the data that we have adequate to the task of really analyzing properly transfer time issues. And might be a bit of a down-in-the-weeds obscure issue, but that's our first step in beginning to work with FTA in developing a revised.
This is a very good example of useless government regulations requiring all kinds of useless studies. You know, this is about as good an example as you're going to get of bureaucratization of a fairly simple process that's made intentionally complicated because that creates work for the planners and the bureaucrats. So bureaucrats, by nature, their whole job is to create regulations. That's what they do. And they're going to create more regulations because the more regulations they have, the more work they have. But I mean, it's meaningless. You know, when Opal asked for a 2.5, 3-hour transfer, obviously it didn't need an equity analysis because it would help everybody getting a transfer. There's no, what equity analysis does it need? None. Because it helps everybody that's getting a transfer. But here they have over-bureaucratized it into this complex baloney formula.
A Title VI analysis. I would also just note that that we are also, as was mentioned from the report on the Finance Committee, moving into an era where we'll be looking at some other fare policy issues that are associated with the electronic fare system. And we have some time to review that and actually have a program underway to do a very thorough Title VI analysis of any changes of policy associated with Title VI. So one of the issues will come is, do we want to think about this as a package, or do we want to take these one at a time? And I think that's the conversation we want to begin to have with the board. And that will be, to some extent, influenced by FTA's call on the data source. Because if we need to supplement the data, there is a wide range of ways to supplement that data. At one extreme, new fare survey, which is a very expensive and long process, or other supplemental data sources, census data instead. So we're having that very technical conversation, both internally and with FTA. So long and short, I think there's some variation in terms of that timeline of a preparation of a Title VI analysis that would allow you to consider separately the transfer time. But we hope to get some clarity from FTA and be able to report to you, hopefully, within the next month or so. That may be as clear as mud, but I did want to give you a report. We're working on it. Yeah.
I don't know if you followed any of that, because I sure didn't, but the 3-hour transfer is basically dead.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
Trimet's here for the betterment of all the people in the region, to get buses and people moved and transportation and everything else. And I just hate it before the sour taste in my mouth that we don't want to. People want to argue how many angels are on the head of a pin. So
there he goes again with his old man type wisdom. People want to argue how many angels on the head of a pin. I mean, yeah, you want to help your citizens. You don't want to be dragging things out, but you have been dragging things out. The board has specifically dragged Opal out. So don't be backtracking. And you know, all of this is a result of the board saying we're not going to consider your proposal unless you drop your complaint.
your information and data hopefully will be recognized by everybody as gospel, and when you talk with FTA, we can get a deal done. Thank you.
I guess obviously this is a very important issue. I just want to get on the record that, you know, we obviously tabled the transfer time issue, and we don't want to leave our you know, Opal, that request out there, you know, and forever. But I think the dialogue.
Yes, you do want to leave that request out there. Why don't just tell it the way it is? It's finished. Okay. Why don't you just get to the point? You didn't approve it. It's not going to get approved. Opal should just drop it.
About some of the things we heard about this morning in terms of policy issues, in terms of fares that confront the agency. it may be advantageous to actually think about those before we move forward. So I think one of the things we talked about is maybe in our retreat, which is October 1st, if I remember right, that we have this dialogue and we talk about whether we want to do just move forward alone with the opal request, or look at some of the other things and tie them together in terms of an overall equity analysis. And so I don't have a preference right at the moment. I just want to be mindful of their request and the need to get closure on that. But I also want to do it smartly and do it in make sure we don't have to have many equity analysis done if indeed we need to do ones on the other things that they're going to be contemplated in the near future. And I think there's I think a pretty robust discussion we can have, and I'm hoping maybe that's something dialogue we can have the 1st of October as one of our agenda items on.
What they're neglecting to talk about here, they're hinting at it, but they're not saying it. There's no fare increase this year, but there's fare increases set for the next year's coming. Okay, there's multiple fare increases headed your way, Portland. Not this year, but they have ones definitely for next year and the year after that and subsequent years. So what they're talking about here, and they're being unclear intentionally, is they want to wrap in the opal request with their new fare increases, which they're going to be considering. That's what they're not telling you. See, as always, they never give you the truth. They dance around it. But when you're talking about multiple equity analysis, that's combining it with their upcoming fare increases.
On the retreat, I don't know whether that makes sense. Travis, I think you were one that also felt to say we needed to get some closure on this one. So, do you have any other thoughts or comments?
Well, I think this has been quite the process, and I think in regards to FTA giving their ruling and then effectively changing the path of this going forward, I think is something that we really have to weigh heavily. But we've had some significant stakeholders who've engaged us and asked us to go through this process, and there have been some things that have slowed this down. But at the end of the day, I really think it's our stakeholders and riders that really do benefit from this. So from my perspective, I would really encourage us to take a hard look at some of the things that may have some impacts, but not take an exorbitant amount of time as we process the data and information.
That was Stovall talking off the top of his head there, saying things without saying anything.
I inherited an agency that I think is inspired by a Dickens novel. I call it A Tale of Two Trimets.